Hello, my name is Natasha Toone and I have just completed my final year as a BSc Geography undergraduate at Bank University. I have recently conducted some research for my dissertation project which closely focuses on food poverty and injustice within Wales with a specific reference to the north. And during my time at university, I was lucky enough to have an internship in my first year working with the uni and the North Wales Food Poverty Alliance. This is definitely where my interest in food geography has really started to develop, and I have since continued to work alongside the Alliance whilst also taking a food geographies module in my final year. The internship was definitely a catalyst to my research, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share some of my findings with you today. So, the Food Standards Agency defines food poverty as the inability of individuals and households to secure an adequate and nutritious diet. It can affect those living on low incomes with limited access to transport and poor cooking skills, with additional issues such as unemployment, an unrealistic minimum wage, and both digital and rural exclusion acting as contributing factors to this crisis. There are currently over 10 million people within the UK who are food insecure, whereby their power to attain and afford fresh, nutritious produce is severely limited. And with regards to Wales, a study published in 2020 revealed that 1 out of 5 people worry about running out of food due to financial issues, with around 160,000 children currently living in food insecure homes, where a healthy diet is too expensive to maintain. So, this short presentation will explore the importance of developing a rich Welsh food culture with specific reference to alleviating food poverty within our communities, with a close focus on a case study conducted by myself with reference to food poverty within Flintshire, North Wales. In 2015, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act was passed in Wales, which calls for a stronger Wales through improving our environment, economy, culture, and communities. And the figure that you can see on screen displays the 7 wellbeing goals for Wales, where we can gather that a Wales with no poverty, and specifically no food poverty, is a clear vision for the future of our nation. The Act declares that all public bodies across Wales carry the responsibility of working towards sustainable development through an approach which ensures that today's needs are met without destroying the ability of future generations from achieving the same goals. So, in terms of food poverty, this framework provides a guide on how communities within Wales can try to tackle the crisis with the application of the 7 goals. In order to achieve a more prosperous and resilient Wales, communities are encouraged to develop able citizens where local employment and an adequate living wage is within reach to all of society, in addition to using natural green spaces to grow local produce and educate the community about the benefits of nutritious foods. An equal Wales will ultimately lead to a more healthier Wales, with improvements to the accessibility of healthier foods that are priced fairly laying at the forefront of achieving these goals. Ensuring that every individual and family who are entitled to financial and food support receive these essential services will further enhance the alleviation of food poverty within our communities. A Wales of cohesive communities ensures the inclusivity of disadvantaged members of our community to try and help them form strong relationships and links to food access points, additionally using the Welsh language to promote both local agriculture and horticulture to increase food production and support local businesses and farmers. And finally, a globally responsible Wales could be achieved through developing sustainable local food chains through understanding the importance of using natural resources effectively to ensure both local and global resilience, thus increasing food availability within our local communities. Using a systems approach whereby all elements of the food system from farm to fork are interlinked instead of being grouped individually across a linear system will help increase food production and its availability to all. Practicing sustainable development within Wales in terms of food poverty is now more crucial than ever, with a recent report conducted by the Food Foundation highlighting how, over the past decade, the desirability and consumption of foods high in fats, salt and sugar has skyrocketed within the UK. Some may argue that this is down to choice, however, the mean price of healthy foods sits substantially higher than unhealthy foods, with healthy foods sitting at around £7.80 per 1,000 calories, and unhealthy foods on average costing less than half of that amount at £2.43 per 1,000 calories. Consequently, many individuals and families have no power over their food preferences and have no choice but to consume more unhealthy food items in accordance with unreasonable pricing, leaving those individuals experiencing food poverty with limited options when it comes to healthy food consumption. As seen by the previous slides, food poverty has been identified as a crisis within Wales. Therefore, I decided to take a closer look at the situation close to home within my local county of Flintshire. Flintshire is located in northeast Wales, as seen by the figure on the left, which has a population of around 155,600 people. The county belongs to the 10% of Wales's most deprived boroughs, according to the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation, ranking as the 5th most deprived local authority and the 15th most deprived area throughout Wales. The Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation is the Welsh Government's official measure of relative deprivation for small areas in Wales. It identifies areas with the highest concentrations of several different types of deprivation, and the full index is updated around every 4 to 5 years, and the figures that I'm discussing today were published in 2019. The figure on the right maps the location of Flintshire's 9 Trussell Trust food banks using the orange marker, with all food banks notably located within towns. The blue stars identify food bank users within the county who anonymously took part in my dissertation research. The county is home to North Wales's busiest food bank and the second busiest food bank throughout the whole of Wales, feeding over 6,000 people a year and 500 families a month, according to 2018 figures. So I recently conducted a study to further explore the reality of food poverty within Flintshire through sharing an online questionnaire using social media to engage with the wider community. The data was collected totally anonymously, and I received 112 responses. The responses I received showed that 30.4% of all participants had run out or had worried about running out of food in the past, with 7.1 voicing that they had previously used a food bank or received an emergency food parcel. Although this is a fantastic, relatively low statistic of food bank users who took the survey, 49.1% of all participants also stated that they know an individual or of a family who rely on food banks or emergency food parcels. This is kind of a strange gap between the number of food bank users and those who don't use a food bank but know of others who do. So if you were to further investigate, there is a high probability that perhaps more food bank users did answer or come across a survey, and even though everything is collected anonymously, the stigma of seeking food aid is still widely felt within our communities, which may lead to some individuals not feeling comfortable to admit that they are experiencing a crisis. As stated in a previous slide, across Wales, 1 out of 5 people have voiced that they have or they worry about running out of food, whereas the results from my survey showed that 1 out of 3 citizens in Flintshire face the same crisis, suggesting that the food insecurity average is higher in Flintshire than across the whole of Wales, according to the survey. Again, referring to the map on the right, it's important to recognise that most of the county's food banks are located along the coastline, directly linking to Flintshire's industrial history. The county experienced a period of austerity following unemployment during the 1970s due to economic hardship, and industrial remains are still very much present along the coastline, which suggests the reasoning behind the location of the majority of Flintshire's food banks, following the deterioration of industrial towns due to this hardship. Here it's implied that historic poverty and economic instability has continued to affect generations of families living along the county's coastline, emphasising the severity of food poverty within the local community. And even though my dissertation project predominantly focuses on Flintshire, it's crucial to remember that most local authorities in Wales are experiencing the same crisis. Food poverty is not often discussed alongside food heritage, and although around 80% of Welsh land is used for farming and food production, there is a huge wider challenge of getting that produced food back into our communities to ensure just food distribution for all. As a country, we have enough food to fuel the tourism industry and our exports, yet we still have disadvantaged individuals going hungry and living almost hand to mouth just to get by. Food poverty alliances have formed both in North Wales and South Wales to try and address this crisis and tackle the root cause of food poverty before the situation reaches its tipping point. Both North Wales Food Poverty Alliance and South Wales Food Poverty Alliance aim to alleviate food poverty within their catchment areas, as displayed by the two maps on screen. Although the alliances share the same goal, their approaches to achieving this slightly differs. The South Wales Food Poverty Alliance calls upon the Welsh Government to take accountability over the food crisis we currently have in Wales, whereas the North Wales Food Poverty Alliance advocate for the whole of North Wales to try and tackle the root causes of food poverty. Consequently, there is a significant gap between the food poverty alliances when it comes to their approaches to alleviating the issue, therefore suggesting the differing approaches act as a combining obstacle which prevents food poverty from being a priority on the Welsh Government's agenda. Although both alliances bring significant value to their communities, it's clear from both maps that not all Welsh authority areas fall within their catchment areas. This suggests that the North Wales Food Poverty Alliance and the South Wales Food Poverty Alliance's work alone will not necessarily fix the food poverty crisis currently spread throughout Wales. However, there is room to suggest that a combination of both alliances' work for the development of an independent national food strategy for Wales could potentially gain more political attention. The long-term goal is that the Welsh Government acknowledge food poverty as both an economic and social crisis in order for a national food strategy or policies to develop in relation to welfare and the food sector. Food poverty to me is an umbrella term, as there are so many different cases and experiences of food poverty that barely reach the surface of acknowledgement. As I stated earlier, we have plenty of land to produce enough food for our nation. However, tourism, exports, and large corporations are benefiting from our food system more than our population. Holiday hunger, digital exclusion, and forgotten rural communities are just a few examples of food poverty-fueled crises, and without direct consideration between welfare policies and food poverty, the future generation goals previously discussed will not be met. In summary, we have identified that food poverty is a current issue within Wales, which has been highlighted through exploring the issue within Flintshire. It's important to note that Flintshire is not the only county experiencing this hardship. Many areas across Wales are struggling to feed their populations with healthy, nutritious foods. There is a huge over-reliance on food banks within our communities, and their hard work and charity should not be considered a solution to food poverty. Therefore, one certain solution to alleviating our communities from further crisis is the implementation of a national food strategy and the acknowledgement of the food crisis within government policy, through highlighting the direct links between food poverty and an unfair living wage, unaffordable housing, and geographical exclusion to essential services. We still have people going hungry within our society, and this is not all due to choice. It is framed by circumstances, lack of power and opportunity to make informed purchases, unaffordable healthy food prices, and ultimately the lack of consideration by those in power. Thank you very much for listening. Diolch yn fawr iawn.